Today is a big moment for our country. This is a big step, real change for our children and our future. Because today I can announce that the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16. Every parent can see it with their own eyes. Social media is making children unhappy. It's making it easier for bullies to harass and abuse them. And it could even be harming their mental health. It's designed to be addictive. Of course it is. Features like the infinite scroll, they're designed to lock you in for hours. But we don't say, oh, look, a teenager managed to get a drink somehow, so let's not bother banning alcohol sales to children. We don't do that, do we? That will be utterly ridiculous.
Hello, I'm the Fourth Accountant, and today we're going to be talking about an announcement Keir Starmer has made today, where he has decided in his wisdom to ban social media for under 16s. So the premise or sentiment behind this, it's about children's safety, essentially. So anyone under the age of 16 or technically under the age of 18 would probably be considered, from legal purposes, a child. And I think that's an appropriate classification. And the concern that Labour has, according to the statement, is that it is taking up too much children's attention. It is causing them to become distracted because it's taking up so much of their attention. It's designed to keep them engaged for unhealthy amounts or periods of time. And it exposes them to things like cyber bullying. And I think these are all reasonable things we all understand. These are things that we are all concerned about. And it's something I think, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we should be protecting children from where we can. So I guess ultimately then, why would I be making this video? What is the big deal? What is the concern? Why is there this, I guess, sentiment that's quite negative about all of this? And I can only give my own personal view around all of this and to why I have issues with this. Now, I think my main issue is that it just feels, and if anybody watches my content, you know, my other videos, and my feelings around some of the changes to legislation Labour has made, it definitely feels as though they want to know more about us, right? So if you think about the Online Safety Act, which is a piece of legislation which means that anybody that wants to basically access what we consider adult content sites, they now need to provide ID verification. And again, the sentiment behind this would seem reasonable, but the implication means that ultimately they get to have more data. So they get to take images of your face, they get details of your birth date, you know, that's assuming you're giving correct information. But obviously the easy way around this is using a VPN. So in many ways, it's just creating an issue that then means we have to circumvent it in some way if we're determined to do so, or the government just has an excuse to collect more data. And it's the same with other things that's been happening as well. So when we think about the changes for persons of significant control, where again, they're asking for more biometric data, and they're also, as a government, engaging overseas companies like Oracle, like Palantir, who will have access potentially to a lot of this data. And one of the things Palantir has expertise in is taking fragmented data that may be on the NHS, that may be scraped from the internet, and pulling it together to profile citizens and individuals, which potentially would be at the fingertips of any government. And Palantir's stated mandate is to basically empower governments to basically maintain Western dominance, as they put it. So what that means in practice, we can only speculate. But when you start putting all of these things together, things like this in that context can feel like a Trojan horse for other things, where we potentially become a state where the government has more of a say about how you live your life and what you do in your free time and what you do in your private life. Because my own feeling around all of this is that ultimately this is something for parents to deal with. The idea that a government should take that place and start legislating what parents should be doing and exposing their children to, I personally find uncomfortable. And I do feel like it is a slippery slope. And I think the other issue I have as well, it comes back to, again, how will this be implemented? So in the same way I've used the example of the Online Safety Act, there's going to be similar mechanisms in place with respect to this ban for under 16-year-olds. So what it will probably mean, and I believe this is the case, is that they're going to be using, advanced, latest technology, facial recognition. So that means that, people of that age, their images will be captured by these application providers such as TikTok, Facebook, Meta, and or the devices that they're being managed on. They're going to have to use this technology to basically analyze the faces of what would be legally children, right? And this is to ensure that they avoid fines of potentially 10% of global revenue, right? So this is not something that they can choose not to do or choose to rebel against. And there's a significant financial penalty for not complying, right? And it's going to put the onus and the risk on them squarely, right? The bullseye, the target is squarely on them, because there's not going to be any liability for the children or the parents of those children with respect to applying these laws. So again, as I say, what it's going to mean is that they're going to be more incentivized to collect as much information as they can to make sure they're complying with these rules. And I think, again, as I mentioned previously with respect to the Online Safety Act, for example, is that children are technology savvy as well. They are native to a lot of the technology, and it's almost like a second language to them in terms of the technology that's being used here. So again, they are going to be aware of things like VPNs, which disguise the IP address of where they're accessing the internet from, and potentially could circumvent these rules, which means they could then access a lot of these social media apps indirectly, ultimately, and flout these laws. So again, it's just creating this massive compliance burden, which ultimately may not be as effective as the government would like. But I think for me, again, it just sums up the nature of a government like this. And it kind of reminds me of the budget announcement in 2025 with respect to the duties on gambling. So rather than actually treating the root cause as to why gambling is increasing and online gambling is increasing, and things like the speculation markets, I don't know what they're called, but things like that, where you can basically bet on anything, why we're not sort of tackling that and getting to the root of it. Instead, we're just choosing to tax it. It kind of reminds me of this similar sentiment here with the ban on social media apps for under 16s. Rather than actually educating 16-year-olds and helping them understand the dangers of technology, empowering parents to basically, make them aware of the potential threats, things like cyberbullying. Instead, it just takes this almost authoritarian approach and finds an excuse to basically collect more and more data, not just on adults through the Online Safety Act, but now on children with respect to this ban on social media, all for the aim, of keeping us and keeping our children safe. So I think it's a very strange scenario in terms of my own feelings, because I understand the sentiment of what is going on. And I have the same concerns actually in terms of, okay, what are young children being exposed to? And actually there is a very, very valid argument in my view that they should be spending much less time away from, their devices and social media apps and things where they're exposed to things which is potentially inappropriate, when you're under 16 or at 16. But the application that Labour has taken, the solution they found, to me feels like overkill. It feels oppressive, and that is a word I've used quite often when describing the legislation Labour has brought in to protect us and to protect, British citizens. And it just feels like it's just another opportunity to create, lots and lots of data on the citizens and start profiling citizens essentially. And it does feel like a very slippery slope where we're starting to normalize what feels like this intrusion, I think, if I'm being totally honest, into our personal lives. But yeah, I just thought I'd share my thoughts around what is happening. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think. But until next time, peace.